Hello, this is Geo Creations with another lesson. Here is how to set up a grid for a grid drawing. For a lot of my younger learners, this can be a really challenging experience. But before we even get started, I want to make sure you have all the right supplies. We have a ruler with 1-inch increments on one side, an eraser, and a couple of pencils. In case one of them gets dull, we can keep proceeding. The first thing you want to accomplish before you start drawing lines on your paper is you want to make sure you have a series of 1-inch dots on all 4 sides of your paper. All 4 sides must have 1-inch dots spaced apart equally in order to make sure our grid is accurate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to line it up to the edge of the paper. The paper I'm using is 9 inches by 12 inches. I'm going to start on the 12-inch side. Now sometimes it's worth noting that the edge of the ruler where I'm pointing with my pencil is not where the inch starts. Look for the beginning of the inch mark to make sure you're accurate. After you've lined it up, make little dashes or dots at every 1-inch increment. Now I'm not going to spin my paper. I'm actually just going to move my ruler upward and make my 1-inch increments this way, making sure it lines up properly. Now all of the length lines of my paper have dots that are lined up at 1-inch increments on the edges, as you can see in the screen. Next, I'm going to do the same thing for my horizontal lines. I'm going to slide my ruler down. I'm not going to rotate the paper. I'm just going to go from the top and slide my ruler down to the bottom, making sure I line up correctly on those 1-inch marks. If you don't get these dashes done correctly, it'll create problems for you later. So you want to make sure that you've spaced them apart correctly, because if you don't, you'll have to redo your entire grid. Next, we're going to connect those dots using the ruler. Now I'm actually going to draw a little bit darker than I normally would, so it shows up better on the camera. But I always say that it's wisest to make sure you draw lightly in case you make a mistake on your grid. And truth be told, eventually your grid will be erased, so you don't want to get dark anyway because it needs to be removed at the end. I'll start with the long side first. Here's how you connect your lines. And forgive me if it seems like I'm talking down to you all, but it is good to make sure you have this done procedurally in order to avoid mistakes. First, pencil on the dot. Ruler against the pencil lead. Line the ruler up to the next dot. Apply pressure and slide. I check to make sure that the lines are done correctly on the page. You'll notice that the dots and the line up properly. I'll repeat the process again. Pencil on the dot, ruler on the pencil, ruler on the next dot, holding the pencil down. If it's lined up, I apply pressure and then slide. One more time. Pencil on the dot, ruler on the pencil, ruler on the next dot, apply pressure. If it's lined up, slide. Repeat this process for the entire grid. I'm able to go pretty quickly because I've got a lot of experience with it. Most learners, especially when they're first starting out, aren't able to move with my accuracy or speed because they just don't have the experience yet. But you always try your best to make sure your ruler is lined up on those dots, because if it's not, your lines will not be accurate. You'll have to redraw your entire grid. The purpose of a grid is to create a guideline that you're able to accurately create a series of guides to make sure your image lines up correctly. I'll be done in just a moment applying the grid to the structure. Sometimes, whenever a student is working with a grid like this, they like to number off the squares on both the photo that they're drawing from as well as the grid on the paper. If you decide to do that, it's fine. Just make sure that you have the same number of squares on your grid as you do in the original photo. So if you have 88 squares on your photo, but you have 99 on your paper, it won't work. Now at this point, if I did my job correctly, I have a series of 1-inch squares that effectively give me something to draw on. It's important sometimes to measure to make sure you have 1-inch squares. If I can tell a square is obviously larger than a square here, then I haven't done my job. Okay.